background
โอเคผมคิดว่าน่าจะยังไม่ได้อัดขออภัยด้วยครับ
okay got it okay ครับ welcome to the 11th class of emerging technologies for lifelong learning and in line with all the previous lectures, I would try to embed the subject content within the framework that I have introduced. And for example, last week, right? Last week we focused on this branch here. The framework was, if you have the hype, behind the hype of emerging technologies, what critical questions should you ask? Okay, I think 2 weeks ago, right, we talked about Bitcoin and blockchain, and I embed the content of that within this framework. Last week, we talked about the technology, the GPS, GIS, satellite imaging, Earth observatory data, and so forth. Okay, so likewise today the topic matter is robots and robotics. Okay, so I will try to also embed the topic of today within this kind of framework of how should we think about it. Okay, so just like Bitcoin and blockchain, just like GPS, satellite imaging, robots and robotics have had its share of media hype. Right, a lot of what is it going to do, and it's going to change the new world. It's going to be emerging technology and our technology and so forth, right? So we're going to be asking again same four set of questions, right? So let me just okay, right? So the first one is, what is it? Where is this technology coming from, and how it works? This is kind of to understand it. Okay, and this is the second part is, again, this is in tune with the idea that some of you may not go deep into the technology itself, but might be able to make a business case or some kind of a platform that brings about monetization, or sort of like add economic value to the innovation, some kind of maybe market-oriented innovation that's built on technological innovation. Okay, so what can it deliver? So what's a business use case? So we're going to be asking about that with respect to robots and robotics. Third question would be, what's the extent of strain on economic resource, right? Impact or environment, and on ecological carbon footprint and so forth. We want to be covering this aspect so much compared to previously when we talked, especially when we talked about Bitcoin and blockchain. We spent quite a bit of time on this question, but today I think I'll won't go into this question. Okay, and finally, how will the society or the social construct co-evolve? Okay, is there some kind of consequential social innovation, right, that results from the technological and business innovation, right? So we'll discuss mainly these three sets of questions. Okay, first, second, and the fourth with on the topic of robots and robotics. Okay, so to get started, okay, so we talk about robots and robotics. Okay, first thing first, you have to realize they're actually, when we're trying to study, what is it? We have to realize that actually robots and robotics are two different things. Okay, it's a little bit like cars and automotive engineering. Okay? One is the thing itself, right? The things you're trying to make, you're trying to create, you're trying to invent. The other thing is the whole art, science, technology, mathematics, computational platform, everything that underlines this whole field that develops the automobiles, or in this case, robots. Okay, so robots is sort of like what you want to, is the thing itself. Robotics is the art and science that basically produces a robot at the end of the day. Okay, so robot. What is a robot? Well, to give you a good definition, okay, this is our working definition. It is computerized electromechanical machinery. It's designed to do things that we human are not able to, are not able to, cannot economically or safely, or simply don't want to do by ourselves. Okay. Now this is going to be our what we call operational definition. I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. Okay, in a minute. But what I mean is that some robots, okay, some robot use case would be playing into this aspect. In other words, you have this kind of robot because you're not able to. Human beings are not able to. In some case, it's we can do it, but we can't do it economically or safely. Okay. In some case, we just don't want to. Okay. And sometimes it is we don't want to do ourselves, or we don't want to do by ourselves. Okay. So when we say we don't want to do this by ourselves, or we cannot do this by ourselves, robots then become an extension. So we still do it. Okay. So for example, okay, just to get ahead of the game, I'll give you two forms of robots. Okay, two forms of robots. So let's call let's say example. Oops, sorry. Okay, e.g. Okay, we have two robots. We have medical robotics used in surgery. Okay, and then we have a Roomba. Okay, you know what a Roomba is, right? It's a robot that vacuums things for you. Okay, well, in this case, oops, sorry. In this case, by the very definition, it's this. It's computerized electron designed to do things that we humans are not able to do by ourselves. Okay, this will be the case. On the other hand, if you're talking about Roomba, oops, computerized electromechanical machinery to do things we human simply don't want to do ourselves. Okay, oops. So that's very different. Okay, so both of these are definition of robots, but how much of a definition is different, right? In medical robotics, right, used in surgery, it's designed to do things that we cannot do by ourselves. We are not able to do by ourselves because it requires, steady hands. It requires a lot of strenuous force. If you do kind of surgery, surgery is delicate, but you also have to sort of like spread chest or bones apart or whatever, right? And you also need a lot of magnification. Sometimes it's very precise, right? It's very precise in a very hard to control environment because you're working in a body that the heart is still beating, let's say. Okay, so you cannot do it's some of the tasks are so delicate that doctors cannot do by themselves. They're still doing it. They're still operating the surgery. So robots become like an extension. So this is the word, by ourselves. Okay, we still do it, but we don't do it by ourselves. Okay, whereas Roomba, we just don't want to do it ourselves. We just let the Roomba run. Okay, it's not something that we can't do. It's not something that we can't do economically. We just don't want to bother, right? So that becomes our sort of like an operational definition. So this is how now. But notice that there is I refer to this paper. Okay, there's a paper. I think it's not. I have a copy of it here. Okay, robot ethics mapping the issue of mechanized world, and in fact, right away, I think there's I said the word dirty. Okay, there it is. There's first dirty. Okay, so robots, to quote this paper, robots are basically designed often, okay, not always, to do three things, or things that satisfy what's called the 3Ds of robotic. Okay, so basically jobs that are D for dull. Okay, that's like Roomba, right? Dirty, okay, and dangerous. Okay, so this would not cover, for example, medical robotics in surgery, but it certainly would cover things like sending in robot creepy crawly, right? Robot worms or robot dogs into earthquake disaster zone. Okay, because as you're searching for survivor, you have to crawl under collapsed building, right? Which may, further collapse onto a search and rescue party. Okay, and dirty, well, you can think of dirty and dangerous together as working, for example, in a situation involving a nuclear plant disaster, right? Fukushima, for example, is a very good case in point. It's a lot of effort at that time to send in robots, not necessarily humanoid robots, to actually go in and maybe shut off the valves, or at the very least go take a reading. Okay, so it's very dirty in that sense, and that's kind of like a radioactive, dangerous. Okay, so you can't send in humans, you need to send in robots. So those are sort of like very utilitarian perspective. So these 3Ds are not everything, but notice it's a often task to perform. So this is kind of like the utilitarian perspective on robots. Okay, so that's I put the quotes here, 3Ds. Okay, so this is not all. This is not all. So this is you think of this as a sort of like a subset of what robots are asked to do. Okay, more utilitarian things. Okay, so that would be something like cannot do economically, right? I don't want to. Okay, fine. So those that's the definition. Now, why do I want you to pay a very good attention to this? Because there are actually three different words here that you may not notice. One is computerized, one is electro, one is mechanical. Now, it goes in this order, okay? You can think of it this way. Historically, robots were mechanical. We had mechanical robots. Let's go to Now this one doesn't does not perform utilitarian, but well, this is more than what. Sorry, I just want a historical. There, these guys. Okay, this guy. Okay, so it's not performing industrial job, right? But the importance is this was in 18th century, right? So the technology was mechanical, purely mechanical. Okay, there's no electricity involved. Okay. Now later on, I think in the museum you can drive it with electric motor and so forth, but it could have just been done by spring winding. Okay, so this is mechanical, right? So you start here, mechanical, right? And then electromechanical comes into play. So these are very early, very primitive robots. And now it's all computerized, computer control. So it actually goes from back to front historically. So it was purely mechanical, then electromechanical with you can think of electromechanical phase of robotic as like radio control toys, right? You have mechanical, you have electrical devices. You can control by turning knobs. So you have a little servo in there, but it's not computerized in the sense that well, the servo could be computerized, but that's not the essence. Computerized in this sense means the control, the algorithm, everything is computerized. So this definition here is where we stand today. Okay, mechanical, electro, computerized. Okay, so that's also the reason why in university you can actually study mechanical engineering and end up being, you know, a key breakthrough innovator in robotics. You can study electrical engineering and also be a key innovator in robotics. You can also study computer engineering or computer science, right? And be in the driving seat of robotics revolution. Okay, so these are the three fundamental discipline that drives robotics. Okay, you put them. So, you know, in the spirit of integrated innovation, you can say that robot is an innovation that came from integrating not only mechanical engineering and electrical engineering, but also computer science and computer engineering, which includes AI and everything else that comes with that. Okay, so this is very much in the spirit of the school, right? Integrated innovation. Okay, so that's kind of like a definition. That's a definition. Now, what is robotics? Well, robotics is kind of like the science that produces it, so to speak. Why is it not? For some reason, it's not expanding. Weird. Okay, there it is. Well, the first person who gave it a good definition was Asimov, right? He's a science fiction. You guys should know him, right? So let's Asimov. Oops. Asimov. Yeah, very prolific. Oops, did I get the right one? Yeah, no, that was. I said Asimov. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah, but he starts life as a real, you know, biochemist. That's true. Okay, and popular fiction. So he's very well known for all the science fiction, and you know, I, Robot. You may have seen that movie and all kind of stuff. Anyway, so that's he gave this definition. So it's very useful definition. A science of robots. Okay, it's science that covers the subject of robots. Now, this is very important: construction and use. Okay, so there's construction, you know, how it works and so forth. Is use. That's where you get the use case thing come from. Now, I expand this definition a little bit slightly to the art and science of engineered creation. Okay, now I use the word carefully, creation. In this case, not just construction, because nowadays you have to be, well, you actually are very creative. Robotics engineering is a creative field. Okay, and you will see that when we talk about biomimetic robots a little bit later in the class, right? But you know the difference between creation and making, right? You can make things because you have sort of like a template, right? Well, human or animals reproduction, right? We say we make babies because babies were made before. When you make babies, you're not creating new kind of animals. You're just creating humans, right? You're just making more of that. Okay, certainly every human beings are very different genetically and whatever, behaviorally, but you're making babies because exactly that's what you're doing. You're making a little tiny human beings. So you're making, okay? You're not creating because you're not coming up with a new kind of animals. Well, robots, if all the robots were something like a variation of industrial robot arms that's used to make automobiles, then you can say, well, that's making, that's manufacturing. But now we're actually creating new kind of robots that moves very differently, robot that is structurally soft rather than hard or rigid. So we call it like soft robotics. So it's really about creating, okay? and it involves a whole kind of engineering. Now, implicitly or explicitly, we do this for humankind, and we'll talk about why that little qualification matters later. Okay, right. So this is you know, so that's what robots and robotics does. So the essence here, okay. Now notice the essence is that it's supposed to do things. It's there to do things. The essence is to do. Okay, this is very important. Okay, this is very important because again, to get ahead of the game, human beings, we jump to this idea of, you know, robot taking over the world, robot thinking. That only comes when you add AI to it. Okay, robots, literally, you can have robot that is completely stupid, has no AI in it whatsoever. Okay, so the emphasis, very important. The emphasis is on the do. Robot is designed to do. Okay, now this becomes a little bit more involved. We'll see later. Okay, so that's it. That's what it's designed to do. Okay, that's what it is. It's designed to do things. Okay, it's not there just for entertainment. So that's why historically this thing is not considered the precursor of robot. This automata here. Okay, because it's doing something. It's making a signature, but it's basically for amusement. Okay, so it's not doing something that we don't want to do. It's a marvel in and of itself. Okay, right. But at least you can see that all the mechanism is there. If you take this apart, I don't know if there are pictures of it, of the gearing. Yeah, I think maybe there's a website here that shows a picture. Well, anyway, it's fascinating. When you go inside, you see it's like a mechanical watch. Okay, except it's a lot more intricate, a lot more, and it's programmable even. Okay, you can literally program this to draw a signature. Okay, so in a sense, if you can think of it as making a signature as a task, then yeah, it is a useful robot, so to speak. Okay, fine. So why robots? Okay, so I can't give you the definition about why. Well, the origin story is from the play called RUR. I can't say it because what it means is it's Rossum's Universal Robots. Okay. Now, interestingly, there you know, many good places to read, and so Wikipedia is maybe starting good, right? Okay, so this is the play, by the way. This is actually a picture of a play. So it's from a Czech author, right? It's a play. It's a science fiction in 1920. Okay, so this guy, I think, is Rossum. He's a scientist, invented robots, so created these guys, and the story gets interesting later. But anyway, the premise of the play is this guy creates universal robot. Now the idea was, the key word is the word robot. Robot doesn't mean anything fancy. Okay, robot means something that's doing some kind of like a repetitive task. So basically, this guy invents robot to do chores, do things that he doesn't want to do. So basically, it gets back to this very definition, right? So this is what he created robot for, right? He creates a robot for. He creates robot for things that he doesn't want to do. Okay, he doesn't want to do. So he's let's say humans are lazy. We want people to serve us. We want servants, but we can't have human servants, so we have mechanical servants. So think of robots as mechanical servants. Do things we don't want to do for us. Okay, and by things we don't want to do, we mean things, activities that are not creative, mundane, tedious. Okay, the word there's an emphasis on the word tedious, tedium. Okay, boring, tedium, daily grind. Sort of thing that in a way is a reaction to what's the Victorian industrialization, where human beings become something that's monotonous, doing something very mechanical, very monotonous. So this is, if you have this robot, that's great, right? So humans don't have to do monotonous things anymore. So that's the origin of the phrase, right? And in fact, I gave you some very good reference here, a brief history. Now, a website that I want you to look at is very interesting, because this is what happens in fiction, right? This guy wants a mechanical thing that does things for him, but the things that he wants them to do were previously done by humans, right? This is the important distinction. Things that he wanted done were previously done by humans. So, okay, the things that he created, the machine that he creates to do things for him, resemble human for that very reason. Okay, so this humanoid thing is a different, you can say that from this perspective, it's a different from this. This one, you make this thing looks like a real human because it's a marvel, it's pretty, right? It looks pretty. You want it to have a human-like, okay? You want to have it human-like because it's a joy. It's wonderful to look at. In this case, you can say that, yeah, well, it looks human, and you can say, well, this human robot is pretty handsome, but the original thesis, the crux of the matter is, it's supposed to do things that is previously done by human. So the humanoid part is because, well, you need human form to do human tasks. That's it. That's what it means. Okay, that's what it means. But if you extract that to the purest form, you can say, well, what is some of the most tedious human tasks that you can think of? It's working on assembly line, making automobiles, right? It's human task. We use our hands, right hand, left hand, take this part, take that part, put this thing on, put that thing on, screw things together. So it is done by human. Now, if within the context of this play, a robot that replaces human beings on the factory floor would still look like humans, right? Because you would need the arm, right? You would need the eyes, whatever, the body, and so forth. But to be practical about it, you just extract. Well, what actually do you need? If this person who works on a factory floor had a automobile accident and is on a wheelchair, can he or she still work? Yes, because he has arms, right? So extract the purest essence of what is needed for a human worker to work on a factory floor, and it basically just comes to an arm, right? Just comes to an arm. So that's why, and let's go to this website. It's very good. There are many websites that say, but I like this one because it's formatted nicely in a timeline, but obviously ends up with Kawasaki robot. But that's it, right? So this thing does not look like human being. Okay, it only looks like human being because it has this thing that we call arm, and to this day we still call it robotic arm. Okay, it's an analog of a human arm. But notice, it doesn't have to look human. First of all, we don't want it to look human because the reason it was designed back then, labor wasn't all that expensive, right? It's kind of normal to have human beings work on the factory floor making cars. That was completely economical. So why this invention or innovation had to gain traction was because it could not only do things that human beings were doing on a factory floor, but it could lift heavier things. So this became the first incident where you have this thing. We are not able to, okay? We are not able to. Now, we are not able to do in humans. There are two things we cannot do things, right? Lift heavy things or be extremely precise on a nano scale or micron scale, okay? Well, that's medical surgery. But right now, being 1962, things we could not do was not about that much precision. In fact, this computer is not as precise as human. I'm pretty sure this robot arms aren't as precise, but it was heavy. It could lift heavier things. Okay, so this is a little bit different. Notice, so with this, you are combining several ideas, right? It's doing things that previously was done by human, like moving things on a factory floor or manufacturing automobiles or whatever. Okay, but it's heavier. It can lift things that are heavier, but it's not a crane, right? A crane doesn't look anything like human. A crane never doesn't do things that was previously done by human. The crane just immediately, you know, when you invented the crane, you invented to do things that human being could not do, right? Well, this is invented to do things that human could do if it had more power, if the arm were bigger. Okay, so that's what makes this different from a crane. Okay, a crane was something that was originally designed to lift things that human being, you know, just couldn't lift. But this is something that resembles what human beings were doing on a factory floor. So that requires a bit more dexterity than a crane. It requires a lot more dexterity, right? So that's why, yeah, you get this picture and you start to seeing it on the assembly line, right? By the way, this is not the first invention. The first invention of robotic arms came maybe in the 50s, but it didn't become, so to speak, usable, okay, until 1960 and so forth, and then go on. So follow this, okay? This is very interesting. So nowadays we get to the point where this definition is not the case. It's now this, okay, right? You can still hand make car. In fact, you know, some old school auto shops still pride themselves on handcraft and so forth, right? But you can't do it economically. You can't mass produce. So economically becomes the key. So nowadays, if you are talking about any kind of mass produced car, right, is this, okay? So it's volume, it's quick, because it's making, gosh. So obviously this is Kawasaki side, so that's kind of called Kawasaki robot, but you can have many other. But nowadays you can't really make automobiles without robots economically, okay? You just can't scale up, And then, okay, then this becomes the next thing, okay, which is what? Which is to sort of like democratize the use of robot for everyone. So think about it. You used to have a big computer that was, you know, used by company, and then you have personal computer. Well, now you can have personal robots. So this is, you know, it's moving to that end. Anyway, so this is what I mean by the historical roots, right? So you can, that's the origin story. Now, how it works under the hood. Now this is something that, again, it's a little bit beyond it's beyond us to really understand how it works under the hood. Unless, you know, if you go into applied digital intelligence track, certainly you would be able to take robotics, and I encourage you to do so. Not even from our class, but literally to just cross-register with Jula Longkorn's engineering school, cross-register with their robotics. But what I want to do is to sort of like delineate what it means by working under the hood. Well, first of all, what do you need? Okay, what do you need to? So let's say let's reframe this. What do you need to make a robot work? What do you need, right? Well, remember, we're talking about robot replacing human beings, right? So what do we need to make a human? So let's imagine what can you count on when you, let's say, hire a human worker? What can you count on? Okay, what you can count on. So this is it sounds a little bit silly and trivial exercise, but let's watch. Let's see what happened. Okay, well, what can you count on when you hire a human worker? Okay, I'm just going to make it he, right? Just make it shorter. He shows up every day, energized. In other words, he's ready to work, energized. I use okay, energized, ready. Yeah, what can you count on? Okay, he will operate within his assigned area, right? To operate within his assigned area. Now let's make this a little bit more fine-tuned. Okay, completely stationary, completely mobile, and tethered. Okay, so they're the three. You know, he's not going to wander off and you know, go do something else random, right? He will operate within his assigned area. Okay, if he's completely stationary, you can think of, say, he is, e.g., assembly line, right? What about completely mobile? Well, e.g., so assembly line worker. Okay, so this is kind of like gardener, right? He has to be mobile, right? You can't just stick him in one place. He has to move. The job stays. So this is different, right? He sits, he's stationary, job comes to him. This thing, he goes to the job. And then there's kind of like intermediate step. For example, I don't know if you guys have seen window washer, right? Window washer, right? So he is semi-rigid, but semi-mobile, okay? So window washer are guys who are hoisted up in a man basket. Looks like this. Let's find a picture of him. Window washer, man basket. There, that's what he looks like, right? So it's a little bit semi-mobile, right? But it's also he doesn't wander off. In fact, he's bound to this thing, and he's tethered to it. In fact, there's a cable that ties him to this for safety reason. So he's semi-mobile. He does go to the job, but really he doesn't. He you know, he just operates it pretty fixed within this, okay, within this confine. Okay. Likewise, when you see the robots, the design, okay, how it works would definitely dependent on what kind of task you are. Again, robots, okay, let's not be fancy. It's designed to do things, right? Okay, so you shows up with energy ready to work. So this is something like has his own lunch, right? So he kind of like ate breakfast, will eat lunch during break. Okay, so already ate breakfast, will eat lunch during break, will eat lunch during lunch break. Then continue working and work afternoon. Right? So the afternoon energy comes from the lunch that he eats in the break. Okay. So same with the robot. Eventually, you will see how the robot has to be supplied with battery basically. Okay, but it doesn't have to be. So some robots are completely plugged into the grid, plugged into the factory floor. Okay, and then you have something that you can see that's like a tether, right? So it's kind of like walking around, but it does have a string, and that tether is usually for both control as well as power. Okay, so you see that early version of Boston Dynamics robots have wires. Okay, right. So Now, so what can he do? Okay, he can, what can he do? Well, he can identify, pick up the object he has to work on or work with, right? So there has to be some kind of a way for him to grab. If he's gonna be a gardener, he has to pick up a hoe and be able to do that, right? And if it's assembly line, you have to be able to pick up the object. Okay, so this, first of all, is a very important distinction between a crane and a heavy lifting robot. A crane, has a very limited motion, just lift things up. You actually have to bring things to the crane, and then the crane lifts it up. Okay, a robot, on the other hand, goes to the object. So you can think of backhoe as semi-robotic. Backhoe. Okay, it's semi-robotic because it actually, it doesn't just keep lifting things up like this vertically like a crane. Okay, but it actually goes to the object, so it has to be able to pick it up, except the person identifying the picking, selecting this mound of dirt is a human being. Okay, so it's not quite there yet. Okay, so what he can do, right? Can remember a task set as well as how to perform the task, right? So in other words, he knows what he's doing, right? So well, randomly, let's go back to this picture, right? The guy here knows how to clean window. Okay, that's kind of built-in instruction set. So the two things. First, instruction set is built in, right? He knows how to do this. So let's make it 1 or 2. He remembers today task set 1A as well as B, how to perform the task. Okay, so this guy, right, shows up to work. He knows how to clean window. Okay, that's because otherwise you wouldn't hire him. He knows how to clean window. He knows how to do all this. And today, he knows that he has to cover, say, this area of the building. Okay. Now, this can be generalized. Instead of task set, you can say notion of task set can be generalized to that of mission objective or objective. Okay, think of it this way, right? If you hire this guy, okay, the task set is to clean window. Okay, but if you hire a building manager, okay, the task set is not, you have to do this, but the mission is to keep the building clean, right? So it becomes more abstract. In fact, higher level, right? I don't hire a factory worker. I hire somebody, my data scientist, who can think. Well, the mission and the objective, for example, is to solve a client's problem using machine learning algorithm. Okay, that's the mission, that's the objective. So I don't tell him what the task of the day is, right? He knows what he figure out the task of the day himself. So note that the notion of task set, as the robot gets more sophisticated, okay, or I'll put another word, goal. Okay, the notion of task set. So instead of saying do this today, to say I want this thing accomplished. Okay, I want this thing accomplished. Okay, fine. So he can remember, he can do this task, all this thing, right? So this is what a human worker, when you hire a human worker, right? He can do this. He shows up every day, energized and ready to work. Okay. Just like so this is a very basic thing, right? So I expect students to show up, energized, ready to learn, operates within an assigned area. So let me put that in the quote to make sure that it's okay. Right. Bring up the object. With on or work with. Okay, good. Okay, so that's good. And he can remember the task set. So when I say task set, so these are the items, the keyword. So I could make this boldface, but I can. It's how to. Okay, oops. Okay. Okay, so that's that. So nothing does task set. Okay. So what else can he do, right? Well, while he's doing it, he can adjust his maneuver I keep misspelling this word. Sorry, my bad. Why do I spell it wrong? Okay, that's English spelling. Okay, never mind. Okay, so this software is American. He can adjust his maneuver, particularly in response to the environment feedback. Okay, so this is very important. Environment feedback. And I put / object. Okay, what do I mean by this? What do I mean by this? So let's take this guy who's a gardener. Okay, the gardener, right? The gardener takes a plow, right? So it's gardener takes a plow and plows, right? Then hits a rock, a block of really hard dirt. Okay, what does he do? Okay, what does he do? Well, he can pick a new plow that's more heavy duty, or he can apply a harder force. Okay, so he's not like a stage dancer that has a pre-choreographed movement. You know, if you think of a dancer, right? Now, I don't mean to say dancing is an easy job. Dancing is a very difficult job, right? But if you think of a dancer, say ballerina, okay? Look at this picture, right? Now, it's a very difficult thing. It's very difficult, right? It's very difficult. But what she's doing is sort of like pre-rehearsed, right? Not only is it pre-rehearsed, she is working in a well-controlled environment. Okay, even the stage is gonna be similar to the studio that she's been practicing in. She's not gonna be dancing outdoor, for example. Okay, so as she's doing this on stage, she's just trying to replicate what she did in the studio. It's not usual that you practice indoor and then you go dance outdoor and you have to adjust because there's a wind gust. Okay, this is very different, right? So doing this when there's like a 30 miles an hour wind blowing your way, it's something else. You have to adjust. same thing. Okay, so if you do this, a ballerina going to dance outdoor when she's been trained to dance indoor is going to have to take environmental feedback a lot. Okay, it's going to be very difficult. Okay, but this is what a typical worker does all the time with respect to the thing. So it could be the environment, right? So the gardening is working and it starts to rain, so that's the environment. The object feedback, he's digging into the dirt and he really hits a hard dirt, so he has to hit harder. Okay, so there has to be a feedback. The key word is a feedback. Okay, so hard dirt, or it begin to rain, or whatever, etc. Okay, for example. Okay, then hits a block. So that's, you know, there are a few other things. Okay, but these are the requirement. These are the requirement. Okay, and of course he can move. So before you do this, he can maneuver. He can, of course, he can execute. Okay, now let's do this. Let's make this A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay, there are a few things. I you know, this again, this is not a full course in robotics, but these are really elements. Okay, so how does it work under the hood? Well, first of all, there has to be an entity. So 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So let's make it he shows up. Okay, so corresponding to this would be a robot has energy supply, either on board or either has either on board energy supply or is effectively plugged in. Okay, now plug in doesn't have to be physical cord. You know, you have this kind of wireless charger, right? A future autonomous vehicle can run on roads, and the road itself can charge as the car or the bus is driving. So plug in doesn't mean, you know, physical contact necessarily. Okay, could be. Okay, so a robot so you have to design these things. So there has to be some kind of energy. Okay, so that's number one. So this corresponds to this, right? What else? And then you know, this goes into a whole area about electromechanical battery and so forth. So think battery science and battery power supply engineering. Okay, battery just a sub. Okay, so that's easy. Okay, he shows up to work, ready to. Okay, so then on, he operates within this assigned area. So this is a question of robotic mobility. Okay, and this is where you have this thing where so you have a robot's arm, sensor, robot, or I'm gonna call semi-autonomous. Now, there's gonna be two words here. The word autonomous is gonna have two different meanings. One is physical, the other one is control or algorithmic. Okay, so robot arm. So that's one thing. And then you're gonna have autonomous, say, drone. Okay, So okay, so you have this case as well, right? Except okay, so something like that, right? So robot mobility. So that's concept number 2, right? Identify object. Now this is very interesting. This is where you kind of have some kind of e.g. visual recognition. Now nowadays, this is very important. Nowadays, when I say visual recognition, I mean something like AI. Okay, so AI can tell, with AI, a robot can tell whether in front there's a human or a cat. Okay, that's what you think. But robots is more general than that. In fact, visual recognition is simpler than that. Okay, how about without AI? Okay, with modern AI. Okay, okay, so let's say with primitive, I'm gonna say with primitive AI, a robot can tell where the edge are. Okay, that's it. Because this robot is designed to pick up things. Okay, it's not trying to do something very general. It's going to pick up boxes. So all you need to know if you're picking up boxes is where the left arm should go, where the right arm should go, and then you insert and how deep should you go, for example. So you need to know where the edges are, that sort of thing, right? So this is where you go and pick up stuff. Yeah, for example, with primitive AI. Okay, with modern AI. Okay, oops. I keep with modern AI. Okay, so this thing is about identifying, picking up, and all that, right? He can remember today's task. So this is obviously robot programming, right? Okay, so that's what you need to do. So execute the maneuver. This is very interesting. Robot movement. Robot, yeah. Okay. Now, when you study things, in fact, we're going to have apply digital intelligence, sort of like a make lab, like a fabrication lab. So think of little robots. Okay, what kind of movement does it have? Okay, well, anybody? Well, think of human beings. What kind of movement? Okay, I can execute it. Okay, so what do human beings do? Contract muscle. Okay, execute say joint movement, right? Contract muscle. Okay, so if you look at human beings, arm muscle anatomy. Okay, and this is very important. Okay, there's a joint in here somewhere. There's a joint in here. Okay, the rotation of the arm. Guess how that's done? Guess how that's done? The rotation is passive. The active part is the contraction. So when you pull this, you shorten this distance, so you contract. When you relax, you lengthen this distance, and it kind of springs back. So it's really the linear motion. Okay. So basically it is linear motion driving rotational. Okay. Yeah. Now, in this case, let's look at robots. What do robots do? Well, virtually all robots does this. Oops. Rotational driving all motion. I'm going to call it downstream motion. Okay. All motions. Any motion. Okay. So, in other words, oops, you don't contract a muscle, right? You actually servo control motor. Okay. In fact, there's no linear movement. If you want to get a linear movement, do you know what you do in robotics? Well, you can think of hydraulics as a linear motion, but that also is driven by a motor. But anyway, servo motor, okay, what you do is you get pulley system. How about pulley system to linearize rotational motion of robot. I don't know. Pulley. Oh, sorry, pulley. Okay, there it is. Oh, maybe this is better. Okay, see, when I want to, so you're not pushing, you're not pulling. When you move things linearly, actually you have a pulley, and it's actuated by rotational. So this is just simple consequence of the fact that motor is a electromechanical. Okay, and servo is a computer, right? Computer servo, but it's computerized. Servo control motor. Okay, so let's go back to this thing where mechanical, electrical, computer. Okay, so servo control motor. Okay, so that's how the robot movement. Okay, so all this is in here. Can execute the movement. He can adjust. Now this is extremely very important. Okay, he can adjust. So robot feedback control mechanism. Actually, control come first, but feedback control. Okay. Okay. Robot movement, and this is a very big area. Now, this feedback can be direct. Remember the guy plowing the ground and hits really hard dirt. He feels that. So, for example, in robot, there's this thing called potentiometer. You don't have to know all this, but anyway. But anyway, so think of robotic arms. Okay, robotic arms. Okay, it's not like a ballerina when this thing just performs a movement. It has to perform a movement, but takes a feedback. So if the movement is gripping, right? If it's gripping and it's gripping something that say fell out, there has to be a knowledge that, when you apply the gripping force, there's no resistance. When you grab a bottle, right? the bottle pushes back into your hand. Okay, how do you know that you drop a bottle? Because when you grab it, there's no resistance back, and in fact this thing just hit each other, right? But even before this thing comes to hit each other, the fact that you are squeezing, expecting to grab something that has mass, has a resistance, and you grab something that has no resistance, you're grabbing air. The robot has to know that. Okay, that's the feedback. Okay, likewise, you go back to Roomba. The Roomba can run, keep running until it hits the end of the floor, and knows that it has hit the end, so it turns. Now, a smarter Roomba wouldn't just keep crashing into things, but it would have a sensor. So LiDAR, or not LiDAR, radar, or infrared sensor. Okay, so infrared sensor in a Roomba. Okay, that's what this thing does, right? It sends a sensor, and if it's coming to something solid, it stops and it turns. Okay, now, so this is e.g. Infrared sensor in Roomba. Okay, it's 6 nails, so that's something, right? Or pressure sensor in the robot hand. Okay, in a robot hand. Okay, let's see what that looks like. There's some kind of potentiometer. Okay, right? So this is a bit more sophisticated, but even the basic, industrial robot with just a clasp has to have that. Okay, so it has to have control mechanism. Now, I saved the best for last. Well, not quite. Okay, he has some intelligence. He has some wits about him. Okay, he has some wits about him. In other words, he has to be able to think a little bit on the fly. Okay, so I'm saying, okay, fine. I want you to go to mow the lawn. I want you to go to mow the lawn, right? And the sensor tell him that, well, not the sensor, his eyes tell him, in front there's a tree. So he's not gonna keep running the lawn mower into the tree, right? He's gonna work around or something like that. So he has some wit. He works around obstacle. He can plan, he can adjust, he can do this. So he has some wits about him. Well, and this is where you say AI driven robot. Okay, so robot that has some kind of planning capability. Okay, now this is an extreme end. Now, even before this, there's a structural end that I haven't started yet because it didn't seem like something you need to show, right? But before this, before he shows up, he is human. He takes human form, right? This is why you don't hire a dog to do gardening. Okay, he takes a human form and so can perform human jobs. Okay, now this is where it becomes very important. This is very interesting. Robot can take human noise form or not, so long as it can do the job that we want it to do, regardless of whether a human can do it or not. And this is the power of robots. Okay, this is the power of robots. So Okay, because well, to be honest with you, if you think about it, right, back in 1920, think of the production budget, right? Okay, let's say the story was that creates a robot that perform household chore, like vacuums, cleans, and cooks, and make coffee, right? Think of the budget in 1920 to make a household robot that looks like this. Think of the budget. Okay, well, not quite. Okay, something like this, domestic robot. Okay, think of the budget to create something like this. Okay, versus versus put a human in a plastic suit. Which one is cheaper to make? Okay, so I'm being a little bit cynical here, but I'm saying the reason that the robot in the original conception is humanoid certainly is because it's much cheaper to create this. Okay, it's much cheaper to make a prop for this than it is to make something like that. But and I'll come back to the big qualification later. Okay, there's a reason. There's a second reason that's hidden why it has to look human in that play. Okay, otherwise the play wouldn't work. So not only is it a good budget saving device, if you have this, the plot would not be very convincing. So there's something about plot twist in the original play that requires a whole robot to look human-like, and not only human-like, human male. Okay, there's a plot twist to it. Okay, right. So this is very important. Okay, so long. Okay, regardless whether not a human could do it to begin with. Okay, now this is where we get to the subject that I'm going to demonstrate with the video today. Okay, with the video today. So this is where you have two things. Okay, let's say humanoid. Okay, and then not humanoid. Okay, and let's just say humanoid. Let's go to something else. Very convincingly human. Not convincingly human. And just human in the barest what's called physiology. Okay, there are three things here. Very convincing humans. Okay, and this goes back to all the way to this. Oops. Okay, goes up back all the way to this. But certainly we can say lifelike robot. Okay, so lifelike. So that's really convincing. Okay, but that's so we can have that. Okay, sometimes you need that. Not convincingly human, but has analog of human expression. Okay, and this is where you have this multi-million-dollar industry of toy robots. Okay, it doesn't quite look human. This doesn't quite look like dog. This doesn't quite look like human. But there's a correspondent. There's an analog. There's an eye. There's an eye. Basically, if you can tell if it's smiling, okay, if you can tell that it is smiling, that's good enough. Okay, so it's kind of emoji smile. It's kind of robot smile. You know, this has a friend. You can say this is a friendly robot, even though it doesn't even have a face, right? So that's a little bit stretch. Okay, so this is kind of funny, right? So back then, toys maker were making robot that looks like it's gonna, eradicate humanity. So that's kind of angry robot or friendly robots. Okay, so as long as has analogs, okay, of human expression, okay, and of course behavior is part of that too. Okay. Okay. Very convincing. Okay, so that's example would be, I think, was that lady that was that has human passport, I think. Okay, so in this case, how about this? Balance. What I mean by here is that sensor in the head, okay, mobility via legs, and manipulation via arms and hand. Okay. In this case, you don't need really expression. You don't need, it can look very rigid, but the idea is that it takes on human form. Now, why would this make sense? Well, because after, say, Fukushima, right? After Fukushima disaster, you need to turn on or off a valve that is, designed to be turned on and off by humans. So it's grabbed by human hand. It's circular, right? So maybe you can have a device that is not human-like, but certainly it would make sense to have a human-like robot in that sense. Okay, in that sense. So in that sense, physiologically sense, okay. And I may add another word, kinematic. So kinematic just means movement. Okay, that's a big physical and the barriers. Okay, so i.e. sensor in the head, mobility via legs, and so forth. Right now, of course, when I say humanoid, or I could say something like animatoid. I don't know if that's a word. Okay, I don't know if that's a word, but I think I've heard something like that. Animatoid, yeah. So I'm just going to put that word there, even though I don't know if it exists. Okay, so animatoid, so it has humans or dog, worm in the berries. Okay, so it's a sensor in the legs. So in this case, for dog, i.e. so human, i.e. for human like. Okay, now this one, i.e. for dog like 4 legs, maybe 6. Okay, i.e. for worm or snake, actually, so it's not worm, it's more like snake. For snake like move by crawling, okay, moves by crawling, for example. Right, so in this case, yeah, okay, or now, so that's, I would still consider that humanoid or anti, but not humanoid at all. So you can have something like e.g. you can have track, right? Like tanks, like military track. Okay, so there's no analog whatsoever. There's no animals that moves like a tracks, for example. Okay, so this is fine. So humanoid, not humanoid. Okay. Now within not humanoid, okay, and animatoid, you can have nature biomimetic. So let's say engineer form, okay, by which I mean human engineer form. And then biomimetics. So biomimetic means nature engineer. Okay, so gecko robots, for example, gecko robots or fish robots, fish robot. Okay, so now, so why would you do that? Now it's very different, right? Okay, let me zoom out a little bit. Very convincing human. The reason we want that is because we actually want a proper human companion or something that, you know, is for us. It's not utilitarian. Okay, this is for us, but in a way, it's still not utilitarian. It's more like you know, to have so we can relate to. Okay, we can communicate. This becomes a little bit more utilitarian. Okay, the reason we develop humans like robot is because we want to send it into nuclear disaster zone in an environment designed for humans, but now too dangerous for humans, say, okay, or environments that dogs can get to. Okay, that would be sort of like the motivation. So there's a link, direct link to humans or animals that we want to mimic. In this case, the link of biomimetic is not because you want to make something pretty. It's because you think that nature did a better job. Okay, so I'm gonna say non-biomimetic human engineer form. Okay. Okay, maybe I should make that better. Okay, so okay, so it's either engineered by human or engineered by nature. Now nature does, you know how nature does engineering, right? Evolution. Engineer, so I put, it's not done deliberately by hand, by way of natural evolution process. Okay. So that's it. That's it. That's all the robots you have. Okay. So this is very interesting. So whereas here, yeah, you're done. You hire humans. You expect a human to do a human job. Here, this is where the power comes in. And here is another place where power comes in. Okay. And here is another reason the power comes in. Because can be superior to humans in terms of, with respect to what? Loads and precision. Okay, and precision means both in terms of targeting precision and repeating. Okay, that's very important. Human beings sometimes can do very good targeting, but not repeating. Okay, so load, i.e. heavy, you know, whatever. Okay, physical load. okay, and precision, right? So all this, well, I shouldn't say just 1, 2, 3, but all of this gives the power to robots. Okay, so this is how robots works under the hood. Okay, that works under the hood. So when you study robotics, and you will get an opportunity to, right? All of this, so you can see that there's some kind of analogs. So when you sit back of all this, everything I've been saying so far, you'll notice that there's a theme of, yes, there's an analog, but you don't stick with the analog. Okay, you stick with the analog insofar as it serves your purpose. But if, for example, you can make a robot hands with 5 fingers, because it's an analog of human hands. But you don't have to stick to it, because actually it turns out that 3 fingers will do. So you don't need 5 fingers, right? So it's a loose analog. Okay, it's a loose analog. So maybe I should add that notion of loose analog to human form and function. Okay, that's very important. So this is why you can say something like this. All right, you look at something. Is it a robot? You can say, well, some robot can have very tight analog, so lifelike. You have something that's just an arm, so very loose analog, but there is some analog there. Okay, so you could almost imagine that robot is, and nobody is saying this, by the way. Okay, nobody is saying this. You can say that this kind of robot is, in fact, biomimetic. Right? So you can say that if it's imitating, taking inspiration from nature, right? And we'll see that butterfly wings, or gecko, or worm, or dung beetles. You can say that humanoid robot is inspired by one of nature's product, meaning human beings or dogs, right? So you can say that all. So note. So let's put is humanoid here. You could say that humanoid robot is, okay, biomimetic, taking taking inspiration from nature solution, i.e. Homo sapien. Okay, so instead of taking inspiration from butterfly, you take inspiration from Homo sapien. In the sense of taking inspiration from Homo sapien. Okay, particularly Homo sapien or dogs. I don't know what the Latin word for dog is. Okay, so that's it. So you could almost say that, but don't say this, by the way. Okay, nobody does this. Nobody does say that humanoid robot is biomimetic. Okay, people will look at you funny. Okay. Okay, so this is kind of like a funny comment. Right. So now you have the ingredient to understand the myriad of robots. Okay. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to close that. Okay. And I'm going to close that. Okay. Now let's turn off the video for a minute to make a break, and then we'll come back.